Saul, speaking of the Democrats, as you know, political analyst Eleanor Clift was in Grand Rapids this week to speak at Calvin College, and she was quoted saying this, quote, "Republicans know what kind of campaign to run against Hillary Clinton. She's too liberal. They don't know how to run against Obama." Your thoughts?
Oh, I think running against Senator Obama will be very easy. Look, here is a person who served two terms in the state legislature and is a first-termer in the United States Senate. He is a young, inexperienced political leader that has caught on to the message of change and exciting people around the country based on kind of a change agenda. But when you get down to deciding who's going to be the next president of the United States, dealing with an economy that is entering into or nearing a recession that we want to stop, that is in a global war on terror with jihadists, that has a situation around the world that is very unstable in many parts of the world, and oil prices hitting $100 a barrel, I don't think the American people are going to look for a young, fresh face that has no experience in the federal government, no executive experience running something, when you can compare him to somebody like Governor Mitt Romney, who's run a state, John McCain, who has been longest serving in the Senate, Mike Huckabee, who's been a serving governor, and Rudy Giuliani, who ran the city of New York, which is bigger than many states. I mean, we're offering experience, leadership, and visions for the future versus somebody who is very inexperienced, has very little to offer from a background standpoint at a time that most Americans are very concerned about our future.
Certainly the rise in popularity of John McCain, whose campaign is tied largely to maintaining the aggressive stance against the forces of evil in Iraq, to quote him. His fortunes have risen as the success of the military surge in Iraq have risen. But as we all know, things there are tenuous. We are in a global war, and things could literally explode at any moment.
Absolutely.
If that were to happen, does that hurt or help a Republican candidate that is basing their appeal so much on staying the course on troops on the ground in Iraq for as long as needed?
Well, I would make the argument that Senator McCain is just trying to be consistent with respect to what we're doing. I mean, he's arguing that General Petraeus is one of the finest military leaders we've had in our history, and that he has decided and he has recommended that we go in with a surge, and that we as civilian political leaders shouldn't second guess the military on the ground. And I think that yes, his fortunes have risen to that degree, but I think there's a lot more to it. I think it's his message on taxes. I think it's his message on spending. John McCain has been a very aggressive, very forthright politician who has come out and campaigned aggressively.
Saul, since we're talking John McCain quickly, George Will's column this week said, quote, "If McCain, who won in 2000 in Michigan after winning New Hampshire, takes it again next Tuesday, Romney will be, in E.E. Cummings' words, a recent footprint in the sand of was." Your thoughts?
Well, I disagree in general. I think that we have changed the climate in the United States. After New Hampshire, Wyoming, and Iowa, we've now come out where this is really a marathon and not a sprint after heading into Super Tuesday.
How much damage if he doesn't win, if Romney doesn't win Michigan?
Well, it depends on how he does. I mean, if he's one of the top two and they're close, I don't think there's very much damage at all. I mean, if he falls down to a third or fourth, I think that would be devastating for him. But the reality is, you're counting delegates now. You're coming up, I mean, you could basically win if you're in second place all the time consistently near the top, and everybody else is splitting first place, and you get your share of first places. I mean, you'll win long term. And I think this is really going to be about going into Super Tuesday. So this is kind of like, we're going into the Kentucky Derby. Iowa, New Hampshire, we came out of the first curve with Huckabee, McCain, and Romney neck and neck, and they're going into the second turn, which is going to be Michigan. Third term, South Carolina and Nevada, goes into the fourth term into Florida, and I think it's very realistic that the four of them come out together going into Super Tuesday and play into Giuliani's hand, and it's a wide open ballgame.
Hold on.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what's going to happen.
Okay.
Saul Anuzis, our guest on West Michigan Week, and our discussion continues in just a moment. Saul Anuzis, the chairman of Michigan's Republican Party, is our guest tonight, and as I'm sure you know by now, Michigan has a presidential primary Tuesday. We moved it up early this year, and tonight in Hudsonville, an event for Ottawa County, events throughout the state, candidates crisscrossing. Earlier, Saul, you alluded to the fact of the impact that this early primary and the candidate visits has on party building and the local candidates. Give me an example. How does this primary help a would-be state representative in Saginaw that's thinking about running for office?
Well, you know, as an example, I mean, Rudy Giuliani, John McCain, and Mitt Romney in particular have all three have done major fundraisers for the House Republican Caucus, for the Senate Republican caucuses. They've been here for Kent County, Ottawa County, Allegan County parties, helping them build their coffers, their financial coffers, working with candidates and giving them an exposure when they stand next to each other and get TV coverage and pictures that can be used in the campaigns. They've also had staff on the ground that have been working to recruit people and their supporters and rile and fire people up. And so the process of going through this presidential primary has really kind of excited and generated Republicans throughout Michigan for the year and a half, which normally would not have happened if we weren't an early state.
In a period in which the Democrats are relatively quiet.
And it's a great period. I mean, look, my argument to the people, I've been going down a lot of Democratic areas, I said, if they're not asking for your vote, why would you give it to them?
Saul, the impact of the sanctions at the National Convention, where is that in your mind? Is that, how crucial is that? How important is it? Is it on the radar to be concerned about?
It's something we considered and we took into consideration very seriously. I mean, Michigan Republicans will lose half of their delegates. But at the same time, you know, having half of your delegation there while you were critical in this presidential race and getting to know all the political leaders was well worth the cost, in my opinion. Our state committee almost unanimously voted to do this, knowing that we'd lose half the delegates. Now, having said that, I can tell you that all the presidential campaigns have told us very directly that if they win and there's not a contested convention, they're going to try to unite everybody and we'll get our full delegation seated. I think the Democrats will get their full delegation seated. Michigan's a swing state. It can go either way. You can take a look at 2004, you can take a look at 2000. It has been very, very close in Michigan. It has been critical in the last 48 hours on both sides of the campaigns in Michigan. So we're going to be an important state and nobody wants to disenfranchise your workers and your base. So it's an issue, but it's not critical. I think even if we were to lose half the delegates, it was a price well worth paying given the advantages that Michigan and Michigan Republicans had from this.
Is this going to be long-term? Do you anticipate this be staying locked in early, or are other states going to get in the mix? Is this going to just become a big mess?
As you may be aware, Debbie Dingell and I, Debbie Dingell being on the Democratic National Committee, and I proposed a reform package that basically has a lottery to do a regional primary that's done by lottery and divided the state into 6 regions, or the country into 6 regions, and then those regions into 6 sub-regions. Look, none of us like the idea of going over the holidays. I think this was, most people would agree it was a mess that already through Christmas and New Year's we were campaigning. I'd like to start this process after January 1, but that means you have to come up with a plan on how to make that work. Debbie Dingell and I have submitted the first bipartisan plan to both national committees. There are 4 other plans that have been submitted. Next week I'll be flying to Washington and submitting our plan to the Republican National Committee for consideration. Debbie Dingell is doing the same thing on the Democrat side, and there will be others, and somewhere in between we'll come up with some consensus, I believe. There was an overwhelming consensus, I think, nationally that people want to change this and make it better. The question is, what does that mean and how will that work?
So, speaking of our state, how much will the Democratic nominee, if it's not Hillary Clinton, be hurt by not having their name on the ballot?
Well, it's not having the name on the ballot. It's not coming here to sell their message and expose themselves to the people of Michigan. You know, you look at a guy like Barack Obama, again, who I think we will argue is just doesn't have the doesn't have the experience, doesn't have the background to serve as President of the United States, but he's also somebody, as an example, that supports raising CAFE standards. That would be devastating for the, for domestic auto manufacturers. I mean, you're talking about making it very difficult to build cars under the Obama plan, so to speak. Those are issues that if you haven't talked them out, if you haven't been here and you don't know what it means, I mean, 15% of our economy is affected by automobile jobs. And to have Barack Obama coming in here, hypocritically, by the way, driving an SUV and then arguing we ought to have 30, 40 miles to a gallon on SUVs, and he's driving a 15-mile-a-gallon SUV, I think we're going to have some pretty good issues to talk about.
Speaking of